You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our show. Universal, who's chatting with us right now, is absolutely correct. It is showtime. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. And, there's such a good chat going between Universal and Ted that I didn't even want to interrupt. I was like, everybody was getting so into it in there that I'm just like, all right.
Hey, man, it's a warm-up.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if we're ever not able to do it, these guys could just drive the show, right? So Universal says, hi, Eric and Daryl. Hi, Universal.
Hey.
Good to see you again. And, of course, Ted follows that up with, hey, guys. Lots of good points in your chats, by the way, that we can always revisit, as we're getting into this thing. But it's funny because there's been a lot of talk leading up to this, this chunk of episodes, this little trilogy, if you will. And it's funny because I remember as soon as it dropped, there were a lot of people that just started going off about like how amazing it was, which of course it was.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just funny because there was a guy that I was chatting with in a Star Wars group online. It was a Facebook group. And I was just going back and forth with him, and it's just, he's just like, yeah, I mean, I get it. It's almost kind of like how David is, right? Like, it's sort of like, I know technically from a filmmaking perspective and all that, it's good. Oh, good. Rigby is chatting in there as well, it sounds like.
Because they're trying to chat.
Yeah, always does that in the beginning of the show, and then he more or less chills out. But the funny thing was, I was going back and forth with this guy, and I basically, because his whole thing was, okay, when is this going to get good? Right? Well, it's funny because after these episodes dropped, he chatted in on that same thread and was like, okay, now it's good.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for.
Yeah. Well, and with good reason. And look, when you and I were talking about the last batch of episodes, I mean, we basically said, look, this next batch is probably when they're going to do the Gorman Massacre. This is probably, which of course, that coming into canon is pretty cool. Although, I think it actually, you guys out there might know. I'm trying to remember if it was actually in the new canon books or in the Legends books. I thought it was Legends, but it was either in both or maybe, it was ported over. I don't remember. But the point is, the Gorman Massacre thing is a thing that has been in the novelizations before. And a lot of people were excited about how they were going to do it. And I have to say, just to kick things off, I mean, one little detail that I think people sometimes miss is how threatening the stormtroopers actually are again. Like, there's a certain ominous vibe that you get, especially with the shots that they had of them. And, particularly, of course, in episode 8, where you just have all this, and that's kind of my favorite kind of storytelling, too. You see this in movies like Twister or Volcano, or where you have this period of time where they're either preparing for something or somebody's warning somebody about something, and there's this period of time that's leading up to the disaster. And there's just something that I've always loved about that, just that, like, you could feel it. Yeah, the anticipation. Like, you could literally feel it as you're watching. You almost feel like you're in that square, like in this case with them. And, they're all just doing their thing or whatever, and Cassian knows, and of course we the audience know, like, there's something about to go down, and nobody's really seeing the subtle movements of everything that's going on. And I always love that kind of storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the takeaways from these episodes have been like, some of the cinematography has been awesome. Like you said, mentioned stormtroopers, they look menacing. It looked like almost like these weird, soulless beings, almost in a way. Like they're just,
and they don't miss.
It's almost like a Michael Myers thing. Like they're devoid of.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, like a devoid of consciousness, almost. It's just kind of like they're just.
And that's a backhanded
there.
Star Trek reference, by the way.
Well,
based on William Shatner, right?
Yeah, true. But I think, a lot of things, the build up, the tension you feel, the way the camera moves around, um, and just yeah, it has that same vibe that we felt in season one when right before that battle that had right at the end where they were trying to like the
Yep.
Cassian's mom made that whole
Yeah, that
liberation
speech.
speech,
Yeah,
and
actually, you're right. That vibe was very much
it's
a
very much
very
the same.
similar thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, very similar. That's a good point. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. And of course, Universal said it is now canon. Yeah, well, we know obviously
Yeah.
now it's canon, but I remember it from reading about it because I mean it has always stood as one of the big atrocities that the Empire's ever committed, and so it is nice to see it finally in canon. And speaking of all that, um, and this is true. This is true to a large degree. I think with each one of these batch of episodes that we got, I sort of like the whole, you hear that bell. It's telling you how many years before the Battle of Yavin it is, and you get this, nice little trilogy of episodes. But in particular, this trilogy, I really like the way that they set it up. I mean, you have the situation where, um, um, uh, Cassian, what's that guy's name? Wilmon. I keep wanting to call him William. Wilmon and Cassian reunite. You see
Yep.
that, on one hand, they're happy to see each other, but then on the other hand, there's a little bit of tension there.
Hmm.
And, that becomes about Cassian, an internal struggle, right? He's questioning the whole tactics of the rebellion. He has to go assassinate Dedra, and and then of course dealing with this force thing. It's funny because before the chats, Ted was theorizing that Luthen and no, you know what? I'd have to go back, but that there could be a Jedi Padawan relationship between Luthen and one of the other characters. And of course, Universal was like, "No, it's not going to happen." You know, Tony Gilroy said, and I tend to lean toward that. Of course, Ted, of course, fired back with, "Well, misdirection isn't exactly a stranger in Star Wars production, right?" But even though I think it's pretty safe to say, I think that one of the things that I really enjoy about all of this is the fact that you do get so much intrigue and so much of the political thriller stuff. You don't really miss the Jedi Sith thing, but you did get a little bit of this Force connection with that Force healer, that messenger, and that was like a callback as well to some of the, you know, um, like expanded stuff that you see in the novels and comics and things like that. And so, that's basically kind of where episode 7 was going. Then, of course, 8 is all about the lead up to the actual massacre itself and then the massacre. And then, of course, in episode 9, now you get the aftermath where, you get the whole political intrigue. Now it turns into the kind of the Tom Clancy kind of,
Hmm.
or the 24, the Jack
Hmm.
Bauer, like Kiefer Sutherland series. You get a little bit of that with Mon Mothma, and now she has to come out of hiding and all that other stuff. So, I mean, I think that that's great. Universal says I immensely enjoyed all scenes with the characters, Dedra and Cyril. Great performances by them. So yeah, I mean, I just thought that more than even the other ones, you had this really nice first, second, and third act going. I more so than, I mean, would you agree with that? That it's more cut and dry than some of
Yeah,
the
it's
last
very cut
ones.
and dry and very cohesive. It's not a whole lot of guesswork
Yeah.
as far as to what's going on. Everything is clear um, about what's transpiring.
Hmm.
I mean, for the most part, and I really love the way, like they said, is just Cyril and Dedra are um, really good, and they have a really good chemistry. It's so crazy because I can't stop thinking that Cyril reminds me of Gary Shaswowski from Back to You, because that's exactly who he
Yeah.
kind of reminds me of.
No, I see that.
But
Of course, there's like maybe
um,
4 people in our audience that might get that reference, if that.
right,
If that.
you ever
Shout
watch
out
the
if you
show Back
guys
to
remember
You?
the show Back to You with Kelsey Grammer and Patricia Heaton.
Yeah,
But and actually Fred
but
Willard and yeah, I mean um the other guy. Um oh, What was the other guy?
Tomorrowland.
Yeah, the guy that played him though. Josh Gad.
Oh, Josh Gad.
Josh
Yeah.
Gad. Yeah. There's a lot of heavy hitters, and I mean, not to turn this into a back to you discussion, but there were a lot of heavy hitters in that series. I thought were cool, but no, you're right, and I mean, the other thing that was interesting about Cyril was that we see him. Obviously, he's learning that he's slowly being betrayed by the Empire, and just I thought the way that
Yeah.
he was sort of coming into his own a little bit. It's like when he was fighting with Cassian, man. He was. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, he was.
He's not a
Well,
wuss.
he's not was, and I think once he's pushed to a limit, you see, what happens. I
Well,
will
he's
say his
choking
favorite
out
method is
Dedra.
like, huh?
He's choking out Dedra, and
I'm gonna say his favorite method is choking. Like he might as well be like a force user because he
I
loves
know.
to,
He's
choke
got that
people.
Sith lore. He's just doing it the manual way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, it's so funny too because I remember discussing this with somebody else too, and they're like, yeah, but I mean, how did Cyril get all this? Like, he's able to just manhandle Cassian like no tomorrow, and I'm like, well, I think part of that, yes, part of it is like what you're saying, right? That he's just emotionally charged up, and you get that adrenaline. But
Mhm.
I'm telling you, as sure as I'm sitting here, that I'll bet you part of it was Cassian. It's like, who is that? Because he even says that afterwards. But he's probably really confused about why this guy is so angry and trying to
Yeah,
kill
him.
him. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
he's like,
like,
what
dude,
did I do to you?
what
What are you
is
doing?
going on?
Like,
It's like,
why do
who
you
are
just have
you?
it out for me? Like, okay.
Yeah, because he just looked at him and just attacked, and you're just like, what?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tension. It seems like he's very conflicted, though. Like, I don't know if he wants to join the rebellion,
No, I don't think so.
but I think he's kind of like, okay,
It would have been nice if there had been like, okay, there's two thoughts to this, right? Because on one hand, I thought it was very smartly written. I mean, that's basically the way I feel about this show in general. I mean, I will say up until this batch of episodes, I thought season 1 was stronger, but that by no means takes anything away from season 2, and you and I have been giving like, 7 and 8s or whatever to
hmm
all the episodes. So I mean, obviously it's not that that much of a decline or anything like that. I just think that season 1 edged it out until now. And one of the really nice highlights, I think, about Cyril's character is the fact that yes, he's not exactly going for the rebellion, but even though it makes sense as written, it would have been nice to see maybe when he saw Cassian, there was a little bit of a like maybe a calmer exchange, right? Like maybe he wasn't so because he does realize, look, the Empire is screwing me like they are you. So, like not necessarily that it's gonna be like who was the Fulcrum, the guy in Rebels? Cat what was his
oh,
name?
callous.
Callus. Yeah. Like I don't think it's that I didn't expect to see that level of almost like a redemption arc. Like, you know what? Because with Callus, that's basically what happened. The
Yeah.
Empire betrayed him. He started seeing the Empire for what it was and said, you know what? Okay, I'm out of here. I'm going to go join the other team. And I don't
hmm
necessarily think, I agree with you, that I don't necessarily think that, Cyril is, first of all, he's not that much of an independent thinker, really. He's that perfect soldier. He's going to toe the line no matter what. And I think that in the short time before he obviously meets his tragic end that he has with this realization, like you said, he just kind of acted out and was all emotional. And I mean, honestly, that it was written the way it probably should have been. But I can't help think, though. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that whole kiss between Dedra and Cyril was so awkward.
Yeah. No, but their whole relationship was awkward. It was cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
And
I
it's
was really
just
bummed that, it ended the way it did because I really wanted to see more of them.
yeah, but I also love the fact that like she still is controlling him. Like she's basically turned into his mom.
Yeah.
Like she's moved her actual mom out of the equation and placed herself as like, okay, I'm your new mom now. Because
Yeah.
she's like, okay, go here. We're gonna be here. We're gonna be fine. there's a great reward waiting for us over here.
But I think that's also part of the, it's funny because I don't necessarily see that as total manipulation. Like, I actually think that there's a big part of her that really believes, like, okay, we're going to be rewarded because we're the good soldiers. We're doing what we're told to do. She was even obviously having a few reservations about that. I mean, one of the things that I loved about just this whole thing is like one story arc. I mean, you brought it up, I think, in the first batch of episodes where you said, it's really hard to take these things like episode by episode because they're really one big story. And I think one of the things about that is that you pretty much have like these two people who are obviously towing the line and they're trying to do what they're supposed to do, but I think they really believe in what they're doing. And I think she's really like, look, let's just do almost kind of how Bix and Cassian were. And that's really, I think, the big theme, if you will, is that everybody is having to do something that's causing conflict within themselves. Cassian he's not really sure. He's hesitating in killing Dedra and some of the other stuff that he's being asked to do. And you have Dedra herself, who is not 100% comfortable with what she's being asked to do and having to put Cyril in harm's way. And she was trying to get him to, just be cool. And then, of course, Cyril is kind of caught in this whirlwind, too, where he's not really sure. So, I mean, I think that that's kind of the overall theme in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, the things that were really good is that the conflict between all the characters, as far as because I think this episode is really about the commitment. Like, how committed are you to your respective cause? And we see Andor. He's on Yavin, but he's kind of like in this little treehouse type,
which
thing.
was cool, by the way. Like,
Yeah,
I would so live there, man. Like that, just that whole like their little patio
Yeah.
or whatever, and then
Yeah, it looks like
in the
Bali
house
or something.
Yeah,
like that,
I'm
right?
like, where did this come from? This is on Yavin. I want to go to
Right.
Yavin.
Exactly. No,
I want to
see why
do
they
like my
picked it.
backyard like this.
I have to expect to see a Wookiee like walk out.
I
'Cause
know.
it kind of reminds me of Kashyyyk a little
There
bit.
is a lot of Kashyyyk in there. In fact, I was wondering, it took me probably a good 5-10 minutes before I realized that was kind of like, I don't know, the
Like the
little
backyard
neighborhood,
of
like the
Yavin.
little subdivision of Yavin or something.
Right? Like a gated community.
Yeah. Right.
The thing is though, is like, you see Bix and she's, tending to him, and it's cool seeing them have their little tender moments where they're kind of flirting with each other. But then it's like, you see how tense Andor is, like Cassian. He's really doesn't trust anybody, and he's really on edge, and it's wearing on him.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, people always understand that, like, okay, he's out there, he's seeing this stuff, and he has to come back, and it's tiring because he wants to be out. He just wants to have a regular, normal life. But because he's good at what he does, he keeps getting sucked back into it. And then, eventually, like, one of the commanders is kind of like, all right, at some point, you're going to have to make a choice. Like, are you going to be here or you're not? Because you can't just keep,
Which I think that was the same dude from Rogue One.
It is.
Okay, I thought
Yep.
so.
Yep, same guy.
The guy that I kept saying was wearing the Purina logo.
Yeah.
Because if you look at
Yeah,
the
little three
Purina dog
dots.
food, I mean, with
Yeah.
those it's the exact. The whole time I'm watching Rogue One, I'm like, this is like freaking me out. They're wearing the Purina logo, and I can't
Right.
unsee that. But I digress. Let's get to some of these chats because there's a few of them. Ted basically says, I definitely enjoyed Dedra and Cyril. Yeah, man. I did too. And then Universal says, was very disappointed that they killed off Cyril, as was I. Would rather they didn't kill Cyril and made him a hostage, and then he goes find Dedra and tries to turn Dedra, and as they escape, they are killed together. And that could have worked too. The thing that's funny is that you can take a lot of these different scenes, much like what we've been doing in the last 10 or 15 minutes, and we've done this on previous shows, where it's like, okay, what they wrote was great. They could have gone in this direction. And a lot of times I'll have, a lot of like when Universal and Ted were speculating and just I don't know, chatting back and forth before the show. Um, apologies, by the way, for us not. We meant to change the time. Signals got crossed, and
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Been a
when I
crazy
went
day.
when I went to fire it all up, and I saw all these chats, I was horrified. Like, oh no, we didn't change the time. But so, we will try not to let that happen again. I mean, we do respect you guys' time, and really we don't really want to do that. But we'll say, thank goodness it was Ted and Universal because they just had a whole pre-show chat, which was pretty cool. And one of the things in there was about dealing with basically what is real or what's likely to happen or whatever, versus kind of like the fan speculation, like what we all do. And part of that is, yes, you could say that it's somewhat of a waste of time, but it is fun to do that. But sometimes, and you can't dismiss it because it happened both with Lucas and it's even happened to a small degree in the Disney stuff, is sometimes, like, I'll give you an example off the top of my head, is that a lot of people were talking about how they would love to see Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka. I mean, I tweeted that out like years before Ahsoka was out, where I'm like, ooh, if they ever do a live action version, they got to get Rosario Dawson to play her. Well, Lucasfilm saw all those tweets and we're like, you know what? Not a bad idea. Let's reach out. She ended up playing the part. So, sometimes wild fan theory could actually dictate or guide actual things. Most of the time it doesn't. It's just kind of a fun exercise. But I bring that up because even though a lot of times the fans will come up with better things, especially with what Disney has done, Andor's a little different. With Andor, again, I can acknowledge, look, there's some things that I think would be cool, but they probably wrote the right thing. And I like where you were going with that whole Bix and Cassian thing, mirroring the Dedra and Cyril thing. Because if you think about it, they're both couples that are on opposite sides. But yet they do share a similar relationship thing going,
Yeah. I mean, they're both, opposite sides of the tracks. They both have to try to be committed to their cause. They both have a partner who's, shaky in some areas and dealing with a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
That's an
there's
understatement.
a lot of juxtaposition, on that. Or I won't say juxtaposition, I'll say a lot of parallels you can probably make between the two of those. Um, but I think, even with the thing with the whole force healer thing, like, when Cassian, like, okay, he has this blaster wound that won't heal, and there's this force user, and this is like, I think this is like the only time we've heard the term force
Yeah.
so far, and it's
Well,
like,
and you could
he's
see
like,
how they already think it's like a mythological thing. I mean, we're
yeah,
not even
exactly.
that
He's
far
like, yeah, this
removed.
stuff doesn't work, and
Yeah, it's just
it's
like,
like, what is this? And it's like, okay, you trying to con me into this, and you know, I don't believe in any of this crap. But then, when she comes over and she's like, oh yeah, tell him exactly where the blaster bolt is before she even sees it, and it's like, oh yeah, it's on your right shoulder, and he's kind of freaking out, like, wait, all right, and he really doesn't want to believe in it. But I think he almost has no choice. And then, especially when he starts saying, like, okay, it's actually healing, he's kind of like, okay, this is a little bit different. And I'm glad that we're actually seeing it a little bit more now in Star Wars, because before we've heard about force healers and all the other different force powers, but now we're seeing stuff like with Rey being able to, like, she healed the little serpent thing in Rise of Skywalker. We're seeing uh, the mind extraction where Kylo is peering into someone's mind and, like, literally, like, almost like forcing himself into, it's almost like a mind rape type thing where he's
yeah,
forcing himself into, someone's mind. um
that would be great. We'll call it the Jedi mind rape.
Jedi mind rape, right?
That's nice.
So there's a lot of things that we're seeing. So, like, even in this this whole trilogy of episodes, everybody's just getting pulled deeper and deeper into this whole web of things, and people really just don't know who to trust. I mean, he really does. Andor doesn't want to trust Luthen, and then you got Mon Mothma. She's going through her stuff where she's trying to figure out, okay, well, who do I trust, and who's really, you know, got our best interests. She's
Well,
constantly being
even
on the surveillance.
yeah, well, even the rebellion, all the different factions having to trust each other and unite into one army.
Right.
And that's another thing, by the way, that I like about all these time jumps is the fact that you don't necessarily have to have this expository narrative that you have to show all this stuff, right? Because obviously, by the time we get to this batch of episodes, when we saw episodes 4 through 6, you still very much had these separate factions that were all, they all had the same goal, but they had very different ways of getting there. And, as time has gone on now, they're that much closer to truly uniting as one army. We're going to have Yavin 4 as our base and everything like that. So, I mean, that's cool. So, yeah, Ted basically says, I chalk Cyril's death up to the randomness of war, and I have to skip ahead to this one because the mighty David makes his return. Hello, gentlemen. It's Star Wars Day. A greeting that is almost as famous as ours. Hi, David. All right. Things are going to get good now. Universal says, true, and I understand that they did, but doesn't mean I liked how they wrote it. When Dedra and Cyril are the best parts, they deserve to be there until the end, or close to the end.
Well, it is close to the end. I mean, technically, because we only got 3 more episodes left.
Yeah, which, exactly. And it's funny because I was about to point that out myself, too. It's like, well, we kind of are close to the end, actually.
Yeah. But I think this is necessary to happen at this moment because it makes sense if you think about it, because the last 3 are literally the last 3.
Yeah. And they happen very close to Rogue One.
Yeah, it has to happen very close to Rogue One. But we know we don't see those 2 characters in Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
And if something's going to happen, you kind of have to have that final push of things that's going to push a character kind of over into the next part. It's kind of like, okay, Cyril, although we like Cyril, we knew from the beginning that he really wasn't the focus. The focus was really Dedra. But Cyril played a big part in Dedra's maturation and growth within the Empire. Losing him into this is going to cause her to either double down more into it or have conflict or be, what I'm saying? There's going to be
absolutely
another pivotal change within her, and that because of this loss. So it's either going to make her rise to the top or kind of fall from grace in a way. And she's already feels responsible because she didn't want to like pull the trigger. That's one of the lines I loved. He's like this, that one commander guy that they had brought in.
Oh yeah, we're like, you're the finger and I'm the.
Yeah. He's like, I'm the supervisor. You're the finger, though.
Yeah.
Like, you still have to be the one to pull the trigger on killing everybody. I'm just like, dang. And it all, and now they kind of put her under the microscope because I think they're testing her, too.
Mm-hmm.
They're testing to see if you really have what it takes to really do this, because we want to move you up, but we gotta put the ball in your hand and make sure you can hit the shot. And she eventually did.
Well, and the other thing you got to look at too is that, look, and this is where I give kudos to writers like Tony Gilroy, to the creators of Cobra Kai, where you end up developing these really cool fan favorite characters, which, in and of itself is not an easy thing to do. And the temptation would be to have these guys hang around because we like them. And it's like, well, you could theoretically tell a bunch of additional stories with them, and they're very well-written, cool characters. The maturity of good writing is, are you really going to serve the story? And that's an easy thing to say when you're just dealing with, pretty much, I don't want to say run of the mill because that has a negative connotation, but like
Hmm.
just your typical thing, right?
Yeah.
But when you actually create these characters that are really good, they're fan favorites. Now you're seeing marketing dollars, you know, there's all this stuff. Do you still have the maturity as a writer to serve the story with them rather than the marketing department or fan service? And that's where I think that this is what's happening. It's like, look, yeah, we would have loved to have had Cyril and Dedra hang around for a while longer. I mean, I remember like last season, when they were starting to be a little awkward around each other, and you knew there was going to be a little bit of a romantic thing happening this season. And I remember saying last season, like, I would watch like a sitcom or some sort of a show with like
Right.
focused on them. If you
Like
gave me the
life of
Cyril,
Syrup.
yes, you give me the Cyril and Dedra show, I would be tuning in every week. It's, their life in the Empire, like, it's like Seinfeld, but it's, in the Star Wars world or whatever. I mean, you know,
Right. Show
absolutely.
about nothing. Yeah, I mean,
But again, you have to say, look, you alluded to that, right? What is Cyril's true arc in this story? Forget the fact that he's a really well-written, well-developed character, as is Dedra. What is their arc? Do you have the maturity to serve the story with these characters, which they did brilliantly? I
yeah, and
mean,
you need a mechanism to do that, and the whole massacre is that mechanism that pushes. In every episode, you have something that's going to push our characters to the limits.
mhm.
And so majority of it is like, okay, first was the mission of killing Dedra. Like, okay, you know what? Wilmon's like she's done all these atrocities. She's got to be stopped. That's why we need to kill her. And then they get there, and then now it's a whole another situation where now they're trying to figure out, all right, what's happening because now they feel like they're being set up. And that's another thing too, is like they're starting to realize certain things. Like, wait a minute, why are they building this shield? Why are they building this thing? And then they're leading people here. They're not really doing much, but it's like they're waiting for something. And very few people are picking up on what's happening. And things are such in motion that it's too vast to stop now.
Mm.
That's why that one guy was like running around like, you can stop this, like stop it now because they want you out here. They want, and this is the Empire's whole plan. This is Dedra's plan. Like, hey, you got to cause unrest within, and you got to kind of cause these little factions to rise up to fight against us. So we have just cause to now wipe these folks out and take control because we were provoked to. Because if we just keep doing it, they're going to fight and resist us. But if we show, like, well, we tried to give you guys, we tried to be peaceful and we tried to do this, you guys were in the way and preventing us from doing our job and what we're supposed to do. You left us no choice. Now we have to take action. And so, but people are starting to see that it comes with a cost, though. And that's what helps develop the characters is the fact that you need something of a mechanism. I was watching, and this is my last thing. I just watched today. It was a clip of George Lucas, and he was talking about the battle with Luke and Vader at the end of Return of the Jedi. And he was like, in the original script, there was he needed a way to get Luke to kind of go towards the dark side. But at that point, Luke has kind of grown so powerful. He's a lot like Obi-Wan in a lot of ways. And so we needed to find something like, well, what's going to push Luke over? And, they couldn't think of anything, but George kind of looked and he was like, it was staring him right in the face. It was just like Leia. It was like, she's the one that if you tempt him with, okay, well, if you won't join, and I found out you have a sister that you tried to hide from me, that's what I'm going to use to get you to turn. And that's what sent Luke briefly into kind of a dark or gray area, as David loves, where Um, now Luke has to kind of go at his dad now full throttle because of the risk that if I don't stop him now, I could lose, somebody I really truly care about. And that's kind of where these characters are. They're losing the potential of their lives. Like Dedra and really wants Cyril to be in her life, and she really wants them to live this life that they kind of plan for themselves, but they just need to get out of Gorman. And she just needs him to do what he needs to do, and he won't leave it alone. And again, this whole massacre is the mechanism that's causing the growth within all these characters.
Yeah, and I like the fact that, it's kind of like, look, you have a situation, and you can't really understate this either. You have this whole thing to where instead of seeing the Empire as one giant organization that is moving as one, and here's our plan. Okay, we have the Death Star. Now we're all going to destroy planets and keep everybody in line, and everybody's on board.
Mm-hmm.
You're actually seeing that it's like, no, we're actually lying to our own people to get them to do what we need them to do, so they don't actually question things or whatever. And I also like the fact that in this show, you feel the presence of the Emperor without seeing him. He's mentioned frequently. It's like, look, the Emperor needs these minerals or whatever, for the super weapon. It's kind of weird because that at least the laser is driven by kyber crystals. And obviously these are not kyber crystals. They're, I forgot what they are. They're another thing, by the way, that actually existed in the novels, and I don't remember if it was like a Legends or even New Canon.
Or something.
Yeah, it was something. I don't know. I didn't actually. I'm sure somebody will chat it in. Speaking of which, I should probably put some of these things up. Oh, Calkite. Thank you, Universal.
Calkite.
See, I knew somebody. This is why we do a live show, by the way. It's, sure, we like to chat with everybody, but we also, sometimes we get stuck on these things. It's like, what's this called? All right, yeah, Calkite. So, it's obviously not kyber, because that became the important thing, obviously, for the laser. Maybe it's the energy source or something. But the thing is, they mention, hey, the Emperor wants it, so we can't really just move these people or whatever. The planet's going to be ravaged, so we have to try to, mask this. And of course, it's great, obviously, and this moves into episode 9 a little bit, where you start to see, like, hey, people are starting to find this stuff out. And you're beginning to see the embryonic stages of why the Emperor is going to find the need to dissolve the Senate for good, because, okay, we're putting listening devices in. Ever since ever since basically the first season of this show, including some things even with the Bad Batch, because that also covered the period like right after Order 66 and through the beginning stages, right? But now we're going into the ending stages of that period between episodes 3 and 4. And what I loved about Andor season 1 is things kind of looked and felt the same as they did under the Republic that we all knew from the prequels. But you just saw a few weird things, like, well, you know what? There weren't as many senators in the pods, right? It was a little bit more empty. Like things, it looked and felt the same, but it didn't. Well, as time is going on, now you're starting to see things shifting toward what we're going to be used to with the Empire, to where even the senators can't pretend that everything is the same anymore. Hey, now we got them under surveillance. Now you're not really free to say as much stuff as you used to. Now we're trying to hide some things from you. And that's, of course, what made Mothma's whole thing, was that this was the pivotal, you talked about pivotal moments and conflicts. It's, her and Luthen and all these people are operating in the shadows. Well, now it's turning into open rebellion. Because if you look at episode 4, they all know the rebellion. They're all like, oh, the rebels, the rebels this, the rebels that. So, I mean, it's like, not only were they a unified army by this point, but they were known to the Empire, including the higher ups of the Empire.
Oh yeah, like Tarkin and all the.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, when you start to see the formation and you're starting to see, um, just the loyalties and how people are starting to, really connect with people, like with Bail and Mon Mothma. The whole, I mean, I thought it was clever how Bail kind of set it up because I was like, well, and they kind
Yeah,
of
that
knew they were
was
like,
kind
all
of a
right,
slick move, actually.
yeah, he was kind of like, well, they were like, well, yeah, they want to talk about the things on Gorman. It's like, well, the chair is not going to allow anyone to come out and speak. And then Bill knew that, and Bill's like, well, this is technically kind of falls under the purview of an emergency. And it kind of goes to the one who has the most seniority, which is Mon Mothma. So I'm going to yield my time to her. And then she gives like this whole speech. And even the whole thing of them building up to the speech, like, okay, she finds a listening device. She fires the dude that was been working for her, who's really trying to help. That's the thing I love is like it's like no one knows who to trust anymore.
I know.
She's trying to go to Luthen. Luthen is like, look, there's someone dirty within Bale's group. And she's like, no, Bale. When he's like, well, it's not him, it's one of his people. And then she even asked him, like, okay, well, do you trust him? He's like, well, I don't know personally because I can't. But yeah, I mean, they should be good. It's the problem. And for the most part, most people were good except for that one person. And, now he's like, look, I'm sending my guy to come help you. And so it's just like, you don't know who to trust. And if you really put yourself in the shoes of Mon Mothma, if you're in that moment, that's got to be heroin because it's like, if I trust Bail Organa, I could end up dead or at least turned over to the Empire, which now this whole rebellion is basically going to crumble before it even begins. But I don't trust Luthen, but he actually sends me a guy that's actually really going to make sure that I get there. But I don't know who to trust. You don't know which car to get into, really.
Right, because again, by the time we hit episode 4, it was all neat, right? She's on Yavin 4. She's in charge of the rebellion. There's no more pretense there. The whole Senate's been dissolved. It's like it's a non-issue at this point, right? So I mean, you have a little bit more clarity in that, whereas what's being depicted, particularly in these episodes of Andor, is that because again, we haven't even gotten to Rogue One. We're still like a year away or so, year and a half away from Rogue One, where they are a united rebellion. They're just not. They're just, even in their unity, there's disunity.
Yeah.
They still have different ways of doing things, even though they're all basically one group. Although Saw still had his little faction that was, off somewhere.
Yeah, it's like they were formed, but they weren't firm.
Yeah, exactly. So even then, right? But here, during this time period, it's like you said, things were a little sketchy. Nobody knew who to trust. It was easy to put moles in there. Palpatine obviously is keeping a lot closer watch than, what you thought. And this is a moment that Mon had to say, okay, am I going to now, there's no more pretense. It's like, if I make this speech and I make the speech I want to make, which was super powerful.
The gloves came off.
The gloves came, especially that last line before it cuts off,
Oh, man. Yeah, and then
where she name checks Palpatine and said that he's a monster or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, dude, you're
yeah, it's over. Like you can't go back.
Yeah, you can't go back. Like, hey, just kidding. I had a rough night. Fight with the husband.
It's treason, then.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly.
And, man, I love that whole moment where because the guy's like, man, he realizes what's happening, and he's like, well, shut it down the broadcast. So he's trying to get to the place, the little room. And he was like, why can't I? He's like, well, we fixed the door.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Man, that was hilarious.
He was all happy and proud of it, too. Like, yeah,
this
we
morning,
fixed it.
like, this has always been. He's like, I know, and we fixed it. Like, well,
one time.
Yeah, it was like, okay, well, if you want to do, now you got to go all the way up here and, get the access codes. And I'm sorry, I know it's a convenience. And it was just like, man, That was just great. Like the writing on it, and then now them trying to get out of the Senate and get her to safety. That was a whole trip.
Oh, pulse pounding.
Man, the one
Because first, like you said, she didn't even 100% trust Andor. Like, I don't know who you
no.
are. And what's
Yeah, like, I
ironic
got friends
about that
everywhere.
is that, you know, by the time Rogue One hits, man, Cassian's like her right-hand dude.
Yep. Well, I think after that she kind of really earned her,
Yeah. Well,
he
yeah,
earned the
that was
trust,
no
but
small feat to get her out of there, man.
yeah. And on top of that, that whole moment when they got stopped by the one traitor
Oh,
from
yeah.
Bale. Oh, and the guy's like, oh, and how he played it, like,
Yeah.
it's
Hey,
a
we
rebel
found
with
her.
the
We
gun,
found her.
man.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, he just
And
threw
then
her under
just
the
shot
bus,
her.
man.
Oh, man, that was awesome.
I was like,
Yeah.
and then the fact that he stuck by her, like, even though she fired him, she's like, well, you obviously you have failed, and kicked it. Like, he still stayed around to show his loyalty. Like, nope, it's about the cause.
Yeah.
And, he's like, I'm doing whatever was necessary, whatever I need to do. So
Yeah.
that's what made these episodes, man, so good. And there's so many different things and so many Easter eggs, like seeing the scout bikes
Yeah.
from Return of the Jedi was in there, so that was cool. Um, Different things where you see things at Yavin, the whole Force Hero thing, just all these different things. They're putting so much connective tissue, and this now is really getting good. But we can't we cannot pass up K2SO.
Yeah, I was
When
going to
those
say, I mean,
things
that.
came out, man, and start
Oh,
flinging people,
man. Yes.
Jesus Christ.
That's the thing where you just now you
I'm
understand
like,
why these droids are so fearsome, and now I understand, because Cassian's like
it's
looking like
we need one of these.
it's like,
on our
yeah,
side.
let's take that one, let's yeah, these things are pretty effective. Let's take one of these things because and it was cool to see basically how that happened, and it was nice and organic, and it wasn't weird because at first you're like, okay, how's it? What does he just see him and I mean it was really interesting to figure out, like, okay, you knew obviously that K2 was reprogrammed somehow, but how do you even get to that point, right?
Yeah, how do you even acquire him to begin
Yeah,
with?
exactly. And I thought, and I loved it how basically that was the ending of that episode, actually, where they're about to fire it up and they got all the weapons drawn. Like,
Oh,
okay, man, we can't take any risks here.
I've seen what this thing can do, and he's like, did I do something to offend you? Or if
Yeah,
I
it's
did, I
like,
apologize.
yeah, it's like, could you maybe point that thing? So, I mean, it was awesome.
Man, that had me on the floor. I was just like,
Well, and what's cool is, the next batch episodes, obviously, it's going to be a year later. So
Yep.
K2 and Cassian are probably going to be kind of like how they are in Rogue One. All right.
Well, and there's another part that I really enjoyed was it was when they were leaving Gorman, and that the one girl was just like pleading for help and like, look, they're killing us. The type, once again, the speeches is like, man, they really knock it out of the park with like drawing out the emotion and seeing, like, Cassian just got that tear that's coming down his eye because he's like, after what he's witnessed and seen,
Mm-hmm.
even Cyril was just kind of like, almost like a what have I done, like an Anakin moment. Like, man, this is.
Yeah, that's why he jumped into the crowd. I mean, he was safe. He could have
Mhm.
stayed in the little Imperial fortress thing and been fine. But he
Well,
chose not to because he was so disillusioned. That's the thing where it's like he obviously had a lot of conflict, right? Because on one hand, I mean, he just lived for the Empire. And not just the Empire, but like the minutia and the
yeah,
bureaucracy of it. I mean, it was just he was
yeah,
all
he was like the
excited to be
number
a
one
paper
fan,
pusher.
basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So for seeing that he was sold out like that, and yeah, he just didn't know how to handle that. And of course, he's in the middle of a big, massacre type of thing going on. So he wasn't really the optimal place to process all of this. All right,
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
get to some more chats because we're a little behind. Universal said, "Well said, Daryl. Brings Dedra's character to another level. Looking forward to this. Her character is exceptional." Of course, this is when you were talking earlier
Oh, about the
about
mechanism.
yeah,
Yeah,
well, and about how she's going to now have her story arc continuing.
yeah.
She's probably it's going to either be one or the other. And Universal has some thoughts about that, actually. He says, remember that Dedra is still doing both the Gorman situation and still looking for Cassian. And when Dedra finds or knows that Cyril is dead, she's going to be even more motivated to find his killer, Cassian Andor Luthen. And then, of course, he even though we talked about this already, he says, remember that in A New Hope, Tarkin said that the Senate was dissolved and then now the regional governors are in charge. Yeah. Because that's what we were talking about earlier about how by the time you get to A New Hope, you see this episode really, particular episode 9, puts into perspective why this became a necessary mechanism where the Emperor really didn't have to keep up the pretenses. But in addition to that, it was more of a nuisance to even keep them as like a figurehead or just to make things look similar. That's where he got everybody used to, first of all, him being the emperor, but then, continued to just chip away at the freedoms and get everybody used to it. And then that way, by the time the Senate's dissolved, nobody really
Yeah, I
says
mean,
anything.
yeah, and I think that's just again like Palpatine plays the long game.
Yeah.
That's the thing about him, and he's very calculating as far as like, okay, I need to get what I need. How do I do it without rocking the boat too much until it gets to the point? Because basically, I think he's just like, I just need to have all the pieces I need to make my Death Star fully operational. And once that happens, nothing can really stop us at this point because there's no way that anybody could be able to stop the Death Star. I mean,
Well,
it's
that was
almost,
it, right? They thought, as we saw in episode 4, A New Hope. I mean, that was the thing. That was supposed to be the end of the rebellion.
yeah.
They found him on Yavin 4. It's like, all right, we got the Death Star pretty much parked around the corner. And,
Parked around the corner. That's hilarious.
we're basically, look, we tested it on Alderaan. So that took care of Bail Organa.
And that was my next point, too, because it's like, I wonder, see, now that seeing this, I wonder if that was like the Emperor's little like get back at him. Because
oh, I'm
really,
sure.
If he didn't make that statement to give Mon Mothma that whole floor so she could speak, even though Mon Mothma is kind of like the one who started.
Yeah, but Palpatine had to have seen through that move.
But Palpatine had to be like, okay, Bail, you
like, all right, yeah,
you put her up, like, you two.
It's like, all right, I got to give it to you, but
yeah, and then now it's like, all right. So when we get to episode 4, even though Leia's from Alderaan, she's a senator from Alderaan, Bail's from there as well. And both of them are causing issues. So he's like, you know what? All right, I'm gonna fix you guys. You're gonna be my demo. I'm gonna make an example out of you guys. That's why he's like, Dantooine is too remote of a location for an effective
demonstration. Yeah,
demonstration. That's what it was. And so he's like, all right.
That brings up the other point too, because right at A New Hope, which is like immediately after Rogue One. I mean, keep in mind in Rogue One, you still see the Senate. So, and by the time that we're in this period where we're at now with these episodes, Leia is a senator. Everybody forgets that she was a senator at, like, I don't know, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there. In fact, wasn't it Claudia Gray that wrote that Princess Leia book that covered her around that time in the new canon? So I haven't read that yet, although I want to, because I think it would be an interesting book, especially canonically speaking. I think it would, give a little bit more information. But it's interesting to see that because in addition to, some of the other stuff that you see, like in Rogue One, right? The formation of the Death Star, and you get a little bit of background on that. The other part that's cool about rewatching episode 4, say after all this is done, so you see all of Andor, because remember, this is the final season. It's going to lead right up to Rogue One, basically. Then you watch Rogue One. So now when you see A New Hope, not only do you get that, hey, this first scene is literally happening like right after the final scene in Rogue One, but you get a little bit more into the politics of it because, it's Senator Organa, right? I mean, you hear all this stuff, but you're not really thinking about it.
Connecting it.
Yeah, connecting it and really, really understanding and just having this rich knowledge of what's really happening. I think it makes a lot of the scenes in A New Hope a lot more emotionally effective. Not just the destruction of Alderaan, although it does do tenfold. Even more so than the prequels, right? Because now we're dealing with this time period. But it also gives a lot more depth and weight to the fact that the Senate's been freshly dissolved, but they're still out there.
Yeah.
They're still kind of doing that, there's still a little bit of the momentum. I mean, sure, they're not official anymore, but, that's where you
It's
get
not
that
enough
whole,
to do anything about it.
yeah,
It's not enough
exactly.
to make any change or policies or be able to,
Well,
really do
because
anything.
exactly, by the time that this happens, you got to figure that, look, they're right before the dissolution, it was probably just ceremonial at that point, right? It was like name
Yeah.
only. It's kind of like the king and queen of England. We had a queen, now we have a king, but it's basically like the monarchy,
Mm-hmm.
patriarchy, I guess now. But where you have the prime minister is the one that actually has the power, all the governmental stuff. I mean, sure, the royals do ambassador type stuff. I mean, it's not like they don't have any power, but it's really more ceremonial and kind of a nod to what came before. That's sort of what this is like. My apologies to all these people in Britain right now. They're like, that's not how it works at all, man. It's like, Americans.
Right, exactly. Don't know your history.
Exactly. It's like, oh, geez. So before the comments come, because we do actually have some people over, across the pond, as it were,
Right.
who watch us. There's people in India. We have some in Great Britain. You in New Zealand. Of course, Ronaldo, Honduras. So, we're global. Even a few in Japan, which nobody's ever chatted with us. None of the Japanese fans have ever really said anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to ponder that one. But yeah, I think that ultimately, this whole thing has just been like just super effective in the way that they carried this out. Like, I think not only was it a very well done group of episodes, but a lot of the canon stuff that they put in there is just so rich. And
yeah, even like the whole rebellion quote, that they try to use as
yes, the rebellions are built on hope.
On hope,
It's like, all right, man.
exactly.
we get it. That was
Nice,
a little
like-
fan servicey. I mean,
No, definitely fan service.
I liked it, but I have to say that was one moment. If it had any blemishes, that was one moment that I felt maybe was a little forced. Like, all right, it's almost like in Rogue One when they're like, well, what should we call this ship? I don't know. How about Rogue One? And you're just like,
Rogue what? Rogue One?
oh, here we go. Like
okay.
I'd like to see the size of the shoehorn that got this line in this movie. And that's sort of, that would be the only thing that I would take away from this. Because really, I don't have very many. I'm going to say that these are some near flawless episodes. But that was one moment, though, when, it's like, well, I hope so or whatever. And he's like, rebellions are built on hope. Like, first of all, that barely made sense in the context of what they were talking about. Like, that was
Right.
just because he said the word hope. There we go. Let's
Right.
put the line in there. It's like, that's not what he was talking about. It's like, all right, whatever, man. I get
Yeah.
it. I get it. You got to put that Easter egg time.
But yeah, man, I'm really
So,
looking forward to these next
yeah, well, that's what I was
the
going to
last
ask you.
three. Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think we're going to see? Because again, these are the final three: 10, 11, and 12. So, where do you think in the timeline they're going to end up falling? And what do
Mm,
you expect to see?
a couple of months before the beginning of Rogue One, I think they're going to find out about uh because we got to find out about Galen and Jen. I think that's where
I don't
some of
know.
this.
I don't. And I'll tell you why I say that, because Rogue One's whole thing was they. I mean, you're right. They did know something because the pilot was defecting, right? But and so there was rumblings there, but they in Rogue One is when they found out about the weapon. And I don't know if they knew who Galen really was. I mean, Saw ended up finding Jin when she was a little girl in Rogue One. Because remember, Rogue One itself even had a time jump. Because you had when Krennic first, you know,
That's what I'm saying. Like, because in the very beginning, we see Jen as a child, Galen's younger, but I think like we need to see how Saul fits in with Galen, because remember he was talking to Galen and his wife before Krennic showed back up, and Galen was around before because he went into hiding. That's why Krennic came looking for him. He's like, "Is this what you
well,
decided to
yeah,
do with your
Galen went
life?"
into hiding. I don't know. I'd have to watch it again because I thought that basically
'Cause I just
Saw.
watched Rogue One again, like maybe last week.
Because I
So
remember,
that's why it's kind
obviously,
of fresh.
Galen after the events of Catalyst, it's
Because
still
I was just about to bring that up.
yeah,
Because
highly recommend.
Catalyst has to kind of factor in between,
Well,
or
Catalyst
it's at
goes
least
back a ways. Actually, Catalyst goes back almost before Andor season 2. Because you got to remember that Galen and Krennic were friends from the time they were younger, like a lot
right.
younger.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as
You're talking about like the proper
the
events,
prop, yeah,
like
the stuff that we're getting ready to get
yeah,
into, that's that part, and I think we're probably going to come up more so on that in these next three episodes. I think we're going to see more of Krennic,
oh yeah,
especially his
absolutely.
between him and Tarkin, to see that start to kind of like, okay, where Krennic kind of takes over the project, because that's what he was. This whole thing in Rogue One was like, he didn't want the project taken away from him because that was his swan song. He wanted to beat Tarkin in this, and Tarkin was kind of taking like, okay, he can't effectively do it. I've proven that I can do it. Just give it to me, and that's kind of their little contest and their own personal little war that they had within themselves. So I think we're going to get that in the next three episodes. We're going to start to see the building and the budding of that.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
and that could very well be. I'm wondering if Tarkin's actually going to be in it though, because I don't I don't know if they'll go that far. I mean, they've already name checked him. I mean, they've talked to like Yularen. You know,
mhm.
we haven't seen him,
No,
but it's like, oh, they're on the phone or that kind of thing. Like,
even he called, because remember he called
yeah, that's what I mean. It's kind of
yeah,
like
the
they
desk. Yep.
right. They're there's like phone calls and there's all kinds of like different things like, oh yeah, word came down from Tarkin or that kind of thing. You might see more than that. I don't think that they're gonna go as far though as to actually show him, because first of all, if you did that, you'd have to bust out the CGI again, which they
Mhm.
could do better now, obviously, and cheaper. But I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see what these next 3 episodes are going to be like. I mean, I'm almost glad in a way that we've done these reviews on Sundays because I watched time constraints. Obviously, I didn't watch the 3 episodes until last night. So, they're still fresh. I mean, if I had been hanging on to this since Tuesday, or maybe like Wednesday night I had watched them or something, would have driven me insane. But now I know that I only got a couple. Of course, the reality is I probably won't watch them till this weekend. But again, at least I know that they're out. I can start to, see what other people are saying about them, engage them before I even watch them. So that part's really, really cool. All right, let me get to a few more of these chats, and we can rate the episodes and put this special Mother's Day episode to bed. Universal says, got a trivia question for both of you. What was the pilot's call sign in Empire when they went searching for Han and Luke on Hoth? Oh, that was, oh man. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Are you talking about?
Yeah, he's talking about the guy in the snow speeder. Oh man. It's like I actually hear the guy's voice in my head right now. It's like, repeat, I found them.
Oh, Rogue 2.
Yeah, that was it. So I remember it was Rogue something. I just couldn't remember which name, and I know
For a second I thought he was talking about the Empire. That's what I was like. I thought he was talking about the shields maybe down in you missed out to him. But no, the pilot, yeah, that was this is Rogue 2. Yeah.
Well, his point in bringing that up was that they used Rogue One as an homage to Empire. And of course, Rogue 2 is correct. Because, yeah, I mean, it's basically one of those deals where, yes, I know they were doing that. I wasn't really talking about that part of it. I was talking about the fact that they were shoehorning the title to a line in the movie. It's just like the way they did it was really awkward. Rogue One. Yeah, that's all right, man. They could have easily.
If they really wanted to make it, if they really wanted to like make it more natural, they would have probably had it like, because that they weren't clear to leave the base, and so if they had one of the guys think like, "Well, sir, we have an unauthorized, ship that's leaving," and it's like it's some rogue ship. We got one rogue ship that's leaving the base, and then like rogue ship, identify yourself or whatever the case may be. And that kind of can be like,
okay, that could have triggered Bodhi to be like, okay, Rogue One. There you go. Because, I mean, I get the scene, right? I mean, obviously they weren't identified at all, and they had to come up with something. But it's just the way that it was done, and it was such an obvious, it's no different than when bands will start to work the name of their band into a song or, that kind of thing. I mean, it's very difficult to not do that cheesily.
Yeah.
That's the problem. It's not, again, I mean, I get the relevance of the scene. I know it was a tribute to the Empire Strikes Back thing. I know that, I mean, the whole movie was that, basically, with the title Rogue One, right? I mean, it was kind of an homage. But, and again, the scene itself, I mean, it made sense why they were doing it. He had to struggle and come up with a name because, they're about to take off and they're being questioned. I get that. No problems. It's just the way that it was done was a little cheesy. That's all. Not bad. Just cheesy. Makes me laugh every time. It's funny to even join this Andor group on Facebook. It's funny that Universal does this because they basically had to, how sometimes when you join these groups, they have like questions you got to answer. And they're like, the guy they refer to as the pilot in Rogue One, what was his name or something? Now, of course, I remember it was Bodhi Rook, but I'm just like, that's not exactly like, that's not a super softball question. So I guess these guys are like, hey, look, we're going to make sure. I mean, the reality is anybody could have looked it up on Google, though.
Right.
I mean, nowadays it's almost kind of stupid to have these questions because it's like, you can just look them up. But I digress. All right. Rating time.
I would say 7 would be let me see.
Well, while I'm waiting for you, I'll just go ahead and spit all mine out. So I'm going to say 8.5 for 7. I'm going to say 9.5 for 8, and 9 for 9. I could almost give it 10, but
I'm gonna do.
and then 9 for the whole like arc.
I will agree with you on that. 9 for the whole trio. I'll do 8 for 7. I'll do 9 for 8, and then 9.5 for 9.
You kind of flip flop them. I was going to give
Yeah.
9.5 to both of them, but it's like 8 was just
Yeah.
so good with it's the way that it's set up. It was a perfect episode almost. So Universal said, did somebody say ratings?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, but he's going to give us the Nielsen type numbers. So 7, 8, and 9 were 714.6 million and number 2 on the top 10 chart. Well deserved, you know? I mean, this is what you want Star Wars television to be. Again, not necessarily has to be in this style, but you do want it to be this quality.
Quality and effective, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I don't expect every Star Wars thing to be like, you know, serious, down to earth, grounded, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, it's a sci-fi fantasy, you know, it's but you wanted to maintain the quality. I mean, I can say that Andor basically is the quality of the original trilogy. You know, it's basically right there. I mean, obviously the original trilogy is like, you know, 40 some years old, so obviously it's been with us for a while.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of storytelling that when people said, hey, we're going to put Star Wars on television, this is what we expected. And that's, you know, look, The Mandalorian was great. I mean, other than season 3. And, yeah. I was trying to think of the other ones. I mean, Obi-Wan I thought had really good moments, but they could have done so much better with that. A lot of that was production issues, though. Book of Boba Fett had promise. A lot of them had promise. So I guess we'll just have to see, you know, what's in store for 10, 11, and 12 as far as this whole series goes. Because it's really weird, you know. I remember when they did Andor season 1, they did release the first 3 episodes, but after that, it was just one episode at a time. I really would have loved it if they had done it in this style. Because that whole prison thing wasn't that like 3 episodes?
From season 1?
Yeah. Or did it go
Yeah.
more? I think it was 3.
3, or maybe even 4.
Well, I remember that I think they did the same style where each group, because that's why it was 12, right? Because each batch of 3 was like a little trilogy, but they didn't release it that way.
Right.
And so that's what kind of drove us nuts. And then, of course, you know, we were reviewing this show for like 12 weeks at that point. Well, really 11, because they did the first 3 episodes or whatever it was. But this, I love the way that they've done this. Which, by the way, I have to say, I still have to watch Tales of the Underground.
On the Underworld.
So I haven't seen a single, like, I read all about it, of course. Haven't seen a single one. How many are there?
6.
Okay. Well, that's not bad. They're only like, what, 10, 15 minutes a piece or something?
15.
Yeah.
You're done with an hour and a half.
All right. Well, that's good. All right. Well, as usual, you know, we want to thank everybody for watching. Of course, don't forget to hit that like button and, of course, subscribe to the channel. And, you know, there's a notification bell. But you guys know, especially the way that we do things, you have to hit the notification bell. Because look, you know, a lot of times we end up having to work. We want to be full-time YouTubers, but at the moment, hasn't exactly happened yet. So until it does, you know, we got production jobs.
Day, we had Mother's Day today. You know, for those of you who are
yes
celebrating in the U.S. So if there's any of the ladies who are Mothers who are watching, happy Mother's Day to you all.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Universal says, will episodes 10, 11, and 12 get over 1,000? Hopefully. Um, I don't know. You know, the thing that's basically, I don't know. Because the thing about this show is you have to look at it from the standpoint of, even though it's very well written Star Wars, it is unfortunately,
Niche.
yeah, I didn't really want to use that word, but I guess that's probably the closest thing, because, you can almost say that Star Wars in and of itself is niche, right? But even within the Star Wars thing, I guess it is, because in a way it is, in a way it isn't. And that's why I hesitated to use the word, is because it is niche within the Star Wars. This is what's weird. It's niche within the Star Wars fandom, but it actually has a wider appeal than any other Star Wars thing, because it's essentially a political thriller just in space.
Mm-hmm.
So you can make it's like, this is the show that would appeal to non-Star Wars fans. This is what you would want to use to get them into it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird dichotomy that way. But I don't know. I mean, I hope so. And again, once the next few episodes drop and we get this final little trilogy, what I really hope is that as it sits and people can take this in, maybe not necessarily, they can binge it, or they can take maybe 6 episodes at a time, or, however they want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think now that you have the complete story, I think it'll do better. Although I will say this, one of the things that I said continually when you and I were reviewing Andor Season 1, when there would be slow parts or things would happen, and I would be like, all right, guys, just wait. Sometimes when the first few episodes drop or whatever, you can't rate a show. You have to wait at least until you get a chunk of the season, or even better yet, get the full season, because then things that you thought maybe were stupid or just like poor writing or whatever it was might make more sense to you down the line once other episodes reveal certain facts, or whatever the case may be. But I will say that with this season, and maybe it's because they released it in trilogies and each trilogy was kind of its own thing, I don't know. Maybe you don't necessarily have to do that with this season. I don't know. Could be off. David, it's funny because David really hasn't been all that chatty tonight. He's just been. Has he watched the show?
No, I believe so.
All right, so he's just watching for entertainment. Well, he wants to wish you happy birthday.
Thank you so much, sir.
Because that is true, everybody. Usually I mention this, but we were just trying to get on the air. That's why I didn't even mention Mother's Day. But yes, it is Daryl's birthday today, so, I guess Happy Star Wars Day does take on a different connotation, too. Which is kind of weird.
Like another spin around the galaxy or something like that.
Well, what's ironic, I think, I could be wrong, because I remember Voyager actually donated, like, she did a buy me a coffee thing because it was my birthday. Last year, I think my birthday may have fallen on one of our show days.
It did.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure that we actually did the show on my birthday last year. So how weird is it that in 2024 we did the show on my birthday, and now here in 2025 we did the show on your... I got to see something now. Now I got to see what 2025 is. So my birthday, August 18th. Oh, maybe if we do a Monday show, like what we used to do. But if we do a Monday show, we will be doing one on my birthday. So we almost have to now.
Yeah, right.
We almost have to. All right, well, that wraps it up for us. Oh, Universal wish you happy birthday as well. You know what? Let me just
appreciate it.
Yeah, let me make this a part of the show. You're going to get like all these happy birthdays now. Maybe not from Ted, because I know Ted a lot of times has to go to bed early.
Yeah.
So he'll, he'll catch, although I don't know, he might still be watching, because usually he'll text and say, hey guys, I got to catch the rest of this tomorrow or whatever. So we'll see. But anyway, we thank you guys for watching as always. Again, like and subscribe if you like the content. And another thing too, the watch hours. The watch hours been dipping a little. So if you guys want to do us a little solid, if you just throw up our episodes in the background or whatever and just let them play through. You don't have to actually watch them, but just, let them play through. You guys know how the YouTube algorithm is. It's really finicky. So we want to get to that 3,000 so we can at least get some, maybe not full monetization, but some things that we can do to add more value for you guys. It's all for you. Because we'll be here to talk Star Wars no matter what. Even back, remember when we only had like 70 subscribers? But they were very vocal. Like our chats would be totally full, but we never thought we were going to break 100. Now we're at like 20,000. If only those 20,000 were watching at least like a half hour each, right?
Right.
You got to love YouTube. All right, well, that's going to do it. Till next time, we're going to be eagerly awaiting the final episodes of Andor. And so we'll see you guys next week when we bring this to you and do it all over again. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.